I'm not sure whether they'll work, but we've informed the candidates that we're having microphone issues, so if you can't hear, just give us a shout. So welcome. I want to thank our co-sponsors this evening. We're the Arlington Parks Coalition. We also have the Tree Stewards, the Master Naturalists, and Arlingtonians for Clean Environment. So we jointly sponsored this event, and I'd like to make a couple of announcements really quickly, just housekeeping type issues. So bathrooms are straight through that door where you came in, and just for safety's sake, we've got some emergency exits on both sides. Please silence your cell phones, and if at all possible, don't use flash photography this evening. And also remember to vote on November 3rd. We have 2 county board seats that are open, and the 4 candidates you see before you. If you are absentee voting, the deadline is Tuesday, October 27th. So I'd like to just give you a couple background information about the Arlington Parks Coalition. So we are a grassroots community-led advocacy group committed to the preservation and enhancement of Arlington parks and community centers.
Lower. I'm going to try this one.
Good evening. The Arlington Parks Coalition is a grassroots community-led advocacy group committed to the preservation and enhancement of Arlington's parks and open spaces. Robust and recent scientific research has shown that the benefits of green space include relieving stress, reducing rates of obesity and depression, improving student performance, providing valuable ecosystem services, and fostering economic development. Furthermore, with more Arlingtonians residing in apartments, are parks the only backyards for many residents. Arlington Parks Coalition supports smart, creative solutions that prioritize our parks and open spaces, not as expendable luxuries, but as necessary and irreplaceable infrastructure. We believe that Arlingtonians should not have to choose between parks, schools, housing, and economic development. With creativity and cooperation, we can meet all of these essential needs. I invite you to join our efforts. Please sign up on our website, or you can check out our table over here, or on social media, or you can visit our tent at the Courthouse Farmers Market, and we have t-shirts and yard signs at our table. I'd like to wish good luck to our candidates, and also welcome the Tree Stewards to give you a little bit of information about their group.
Okay, well, all the information about Tree Stewards you can find on our website, treestewards.org, especially about our new class that we're starting volunteer training February 2nd on Tuesdays through February 2nd through April 26th, I think. And we'd love to have you join us. We specialize in training volunteers to go out in the community and assist their neighbors. So private residences, we work on trees. We also do a lot of work trying to get people to get active on their Greens Committee of their HOA or condo or church group or whatever. And we work a lot with street trees and serving as advocates for trees. So come join us.
Thanks, Nora. Hi, my name is Marion Jordan. I'm the president of the Arlington Regional Master Naturalist. And we have about 200 members now. Last year we provided over 11,600 hours of volunteer service. And our focus is in three major areas. One is habitat restoration within the parks. And so we have active projects in at least 10 parks where we're removing invasives and in some cases doing restoration plantings. You're welcome to join us. We have a website, armn.org, and we have cards over there with the website, and we probably have a project going in a park near you, so come join us. We do a lot of education and outreach, everything from birthday parties for the kids at the nature centers, to exhibits at the county fair and farmers markets, to more formal adult education programs. We have one coming up in a couple weeks on living with deer in our urban environment, and we have some flyers with more information at our table. We also do quite a bit of citizen science. All our volunteers are trained and certified, and so our citizen science focuses on streams, water, animals, insects, and local habitat. And so we're able to make a contribution that way. So I welcome you all and look forward to a great discussion tonight.
Good evening. I'm Eleanor Hodges, the director of Arlingtonians for a Clean Environment. I'm very pleased to welcome everybody tonight. Arlingtonians for a Clean Environment has been leading efforts in our local community to protect and improve Arlington's open spaces for close to 40 years, and we're very proud of that work. We have worked with all the groups here tonight, and we actively engage volunteers regularly in our local parks and open spaces to get out and enjoy and improve our parks, and we're very proud of that. Last year we had over 2,700 hours committed to Arlington's parks, and we also continue to actively educate all of our students about the importance of environmental stewardship. We're really looking forward to engaging with our future Arlington County leadership tonight. I think that these issues are very important. I'm proud to be an Arlington resident. As an active bicycle commuter, as a parent, I really look forward to seeing how we can work together to protect and continue these open spaces for future generations.
Thank you. So now I'd like to begin asking the candidates to give their opening remarks. We are going to have 2 minutes apiece for opening remarks, and the order will be Mike McMenamin, Christian Dorsey, Audrey Clement, and Katie Crystal.
Well, good evening, folks. My name is Mike McMenamin, and I am running for Arlington County Board. I'm a 21-year resident of Arlington County, and I've been involved in civic life for quite a bit of time. I was president of the Arlington County Civic Federation. I was president of my neighborhood association for 2 terms, and I also sat on the Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission of the County, where we oversee the budget for about 8 years. I'm married. I had 2 children. Both of them have been through the Arlington County public school system. One is in college at Brown University, and one is in his last year at HB Woodlawn. I'm a communications attorney by trade and a small business owner here in Arlington County. We live in a wonderful community, folks. You know, we have great parks, great schools. It's just civic activists, folks like you that come out to these debates, but we can do better as a community. What I'm all about is getting back to basics. Let's pave our roads. Let's fix our infrastructure. Let's be good stewards of our money and make sure that we don't spend on wasteful spending such as $1 million bus stops. That we put money back into schools and parks and do the right things for the community. That we take and look explicitly at the business community itself. There's a high occupancy rate in the county, and what that means to us, the residential taxpayer, is it's about 22%. If that is not about at the 50% level, we bear the burden of those taxes on the residential side because we're not making them up on the business side. So we need to get those buildings filled. We also, as a small business owner, I understand the fact that we're not competitive in the region in terms of business because our business taxes are much too high. And if we want to get companies like Marriott and other big campus folks to come into this county, we're going to have to become more competitive. We've lost a lot of things in this county in regards to office space holders like TSA and so forth. We need to make sure that we are competitive because we need to keep those buildings filled and we need to do the right things so we can have the benefits in the county that we've had before, such as parks and schools. So for those reasons, that's why I'm running for Arlington County Board, and I ask for your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Dorsey. I'm one of 2 Democratic nominees for County Board, and I appreciate you all coming out tonight. I agree with Mike. Arlington is a great community. But the critical question facing us with this election and in the near term moving forward is how are we going to grow sustainably in a way that ensures that the quality of life that we all enjoy as Arlingtonians is not only maintained, but is enhanced. Now, to do this is going to require that we elect people to the board who have skills and experience and an understanding that creativity and innovative approaches are going to be necessary to meet the challenges that we have. Now, I've been a resident of Arlington County for about 22 years, and I've been a veteran of many commissions and task forces and volunteer opportunities to engage civically. But I also bring a wealth of professional experiences that are uniquely suited to meet the challenges that we have today. When I ran a community development corporation in nearby Nauk, had the privilege of spearheading the creation of the first Earthcraft certified multifamily apartment building in Arlington County. As part of that work, we also did something that hadn't been done before in Arlington, developed a social services center that included private social workers along with county staff, a unique public-private partnership to help improve the human capital in that neighborhood. And I ran an organization called the Reading Connection, where we were renowned for delivering programs in support of homeless children that delivered maximum value on limited budgets. The common thread throughout all of my experiences is that I succeed in results through innovative and creative thinking. And that's what we need to be sustainably excellent here in Arlington. And that is quite clearly evident in the challenges that we face with parks and open spaces and community centers. We have growing unmet demand, and we have limited resources and few easy answers to meet that demand. So we need leaders who can guide our enhancing and expanding our parks through creative and strategic thinking. I think I am such a leader. Hopefully through our discussion tonight, you all will agree. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Audrey Clement, the independent candidate for Arlington County Board. As an 11-year Westover resident and longtime civic activist with a PhD in political science and service as a congressional fellow, I am running to reform county government. At 22%, Arlington's office vacancy rate is at an all-time high. In Roslyn, more than 2.7 million square feet of office space sit empty, including a 35-story trophy office building near the Roslyn Metro that remains vacant almost 2 years after construction. Yet the county just approved the sale of parkland in West Roslyn for another office development. Not only will the deal diminish the quality of life for Roslyn residents, it makes no economic sense in the current real estate market. A number of federal agencies previously located in Arlington, including the National Science Foundation, Fish and Wildlife Service, and TSA, have relocated due to escalating rents driven by higher taxes. Yet business tax relief is not on the table. We also face a school enrollment crisis that the county board has failed to adequately address. In 2014, the school board itself predicted a 2,500 classroom seat deficit even after approving a $450 million capital budget. County board plans to roll out a new affordable housing master plan, mandating 15,800 new units of affordable housing at 632 units per year for the next 25 years. The cost to the county may exceed $150 million per year. This is not affordable. Meanwhile, Arlington County Board plays lip service to the so-called Arlington Way while routinely ignoring citizen input. If elected, I pledge to address the financial crisis and restore democracy to county government by acting transparently, not simply rubber stamping done deals. To do that, I need your help. Vote Clement for County Board. Together, we can make the Arlington Way more than an empty phrase. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you to the Arlington Parks Coalition, the Tree Stewards, the Regional Master Naturalists, Arlingtonians for Clean Environment for hosting this evening, and to you all for being here. I'm Katie Crystal. I'm one of 2 Democratic nominees for Arlington County Board, and I'd like to take my 2 minutes to be a little frank with you all, because 2015 hasn't just been a county board election year. It's also been a year in which the county has frankly gotten it wrong more than a couple times when it comes to parks, asking for citizen engagement on the Western Roslyn Area Plan without disclosing pre-existing development agreements, discounting parkland as free land in public remarks. Now, if you're a candidate for county board, there are a couple of ways to react to those missteps. You can try and capitalize on those problems, playing up parks versus schools versus development and sowing mistrust that anyone who supports a range of affordable housing options can't also support green space. But here's the trouble with that approach. Candidates sometimes become elected members of the board, and then all those other community needs like schools and housing become your responsibility too. That's why I've been working so hard to learn from these missteps instead of just flogging them, learning from our community leaders on parkland, energy conservation, schools, facilities, and yes, on development, to figure out what we can do differently here in Arlington to protect and expand our parks. Getting more aggressive in our acquisition of parkland, making it easier for residents to help the county identify opportunities in a fast-moving real estate market. building up, under, and over when it comes to facilities to protect green space in our planning for the school capacity crisis, and changing our practices to make sure that parks and tree canopies are a bigger priority in site planning, emphasizing green space as well as plazas and hardscaping, ensuring sufficient soil volume for trees in our urban corridors. As tree lovers know, anyone with an axe can cut something down, but I hope I'll have the opportunity to engage with you all on the much harder work of growing and cultivating a greener Arlington. Thank you for your consideration on November 3rd. I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Thank you, each of you. And I think we touched on a few of the topics that will come up tonight, so I think we're in a good place for that. We're going to start this evening with questions from the four co-sponsoring groups, and then we'll follow that with a town hall discussion with each of your questions. So I've got questions in a random order, and I think
Let's just start from Audrey to Katie, and then we'll alternate Katie to Audrey.
as we answer these questions.
The first question, Arlington loses most of its trees due to ongoing infill occurring where small houses and surrounding yard trees are torn down so large houses can be built. This is legal under current lot coverage and zoning regulations, so no current board member has discussed the issue publicly. Would you address the loss of trees due to tear downs, and if so, how?
Well, nowhere is this phenomenon more evident than in the vicinity of Lacey Park, at the corner of Washington Boulevard and George Mason Drive, where a beautiful wooded area, I mean really truly magnificent wooded area, was completely demolished to put in several huge McMansions. I mean, these houses weren't even respectable. They were basically barns. So we replaced a wooded area with a complement of barns. And there has got to be something wrong with the zoning ordinance that permits that type of construction. Now, I know county board members have addressed this issue in the past, and I believe they've indicated that there was a change in the zoning ordinance, an improvement back in 2005 or 6, that did limit the amount of acreage or coverage that could be built on a given lot, but clearly that ordinance is inadequate. I believe county board has responded repeatedly that there's nothing they can do about it because they require the approval of the General Assembly to make any further modifications to the ordinance. Now, I don't know if that's true, and I would appreciate response or feedback from the other candidates, the audience, or the host to enlighten me on this subject, because I definitely agree that this is the principal reason for the loss of tree canopy in the county, and unless the ordinance is changed, we're going to see more of it.
Yeah, I think we'll save time if we stay in our.
Sounds good. The lot coverage rules, I disagree with those, just as a basic general. The lot coverage rules I basically disagree with in this county, because you can build in a house on an entire lot and you lose a lot of the green space and also the trees, but you also run into issues in the county because you've allowed these people to build up, that some of the rainwater falls off these houses onto smaller houses and ends up flooding people's houses, basements and things of that nature. So we need to go back and take a look at the lot coverage rules, and also at the same time talk about this tree canopy issue, because we've lost quite a bit of tree canopy in this county over the years. I will give credit to the county for the tree program that they've put together over the years, where you can go and get a free tree from the county, sometimes even 2 or 3 trees. I've benefited from that program for 3 or 4 years, and by putting more trees back into my yard out back, because the trees, and replacing some of the trees, because, we need to have more tree coverage in the county, and it also makes for a nicer, greener environment to live in. So I'm all for that program in the county, and I would keep that program in the county, because I see it as being very beneficial. And also, I would go back and take a look at the lot coverage rules and see what we can do there, because there's no reason why we should be tearing down a house and putting an entire house on an entire piece of property. That's just wrong, I think, in some cases, most cases, because unfortunately in my neighborhood it's historic and you can't do that. So we still have our trees and so forth. And it's one of the nicer things about living in a historic district, but most of you don't benefit from that because I live in the only historic district in the county. So it has its good points and it's got its bad points, let me tell you, because you're allowed to build some things and do some things, but we have kept our sense of community and green space. Thank you.
So, you know, when the county relaxed lot coverage requirements and allowed people to build from lot line to lot line, making homes in fact bigger, and by the way, also much less affordable, this exacerbated the environmental issues as we've discussed. So when you think about how you change this, this is where I was speaking of creative thinking is required. We may not be able to offer or wield the stick because state requirements do allow by right developers, by right builders to be able to do what they will on their own properties. However, we still retain the ability to deploy carrots. And just as we relax lot coverage requirements, we can tighten them up. And if people want to get a more relaxed lot coverage, what I would favor is that we get pretty restrictive on properties. And if we want to give people a little bit of relief, then what they have to do is agree not to clear cut the parcels of trees. What we see builders doing is looking at a parcel as a blank slate from which to build a monstrosity in many cases. That incentive needs to change, and we can do so by offering carrots through our zoning ordinance. What we shouldn't do is just simply throw up our hands and believe we absolutely have no recourse at all, because while the Commonwealth is rather friendly towards people doing what they will with their own property, there still are protections for communities to preserve things that have value, such as tree canopy, such as preventing stormwater runoff, such as preventing degradation of neighboring properties. So that's the approach that I would take in order to deal with this issue. As we look all throughout the county, no matter what neighborhood, I guess except for Maywood, this phenomenon exists, where people clear cut the parcels before they even design what's going to go in its place. And that's an absolute horror for our future sustainability. What we have to do is orient our laws so that we make that a non-desirable option on the part of builders.
Thank you for this question. I do think there's an opportunity and perhaps an imperative to take a fresh look at the phenomenon of tear-downs that is characterizing so much of our neighborhoods. As others have stated, we are somewhat limited in the state context in which we're in. We may not have the option to persuade Richmond to allow us to be a little more rigid on by right redevelopment. However, I do think that this is a challenge that we can tackle because this phenomenon of tear-downs has a host of implications, not only for our tree canopy, but as Christian alluded to, affordability, especially for our middle-class families, and it is driving in part our school capacity challenges. And so thinking about, one of the ways I'm approaching this is thinking about what the alternatives are and how we can make it easier to make modest additions to smaller homes, smaller ramblers, for example, so that we're not inadvertently shifting the economics towards teardowns. Making it easier to make a small addition on your home, for example, to help you age in place, or to sell it to a young family that might need to add one bedroom, but certainly does not need a small rambler torn down to be a multi-million-dollar mansion. So I do think it's an opportunity for us to take a look at our restrictions around additions to homes as a way of shifting the economics back towards keeping smaller homes, which allows us to keep the trees in the surrounding area of that home. The last thing that I would note is just, again, emphasize, as Mike did, the annual tree program. I think this is a great approach and is representative of what we ought to be doing in Arlington with our tree canopy, not just looking for ways to protect, but also expand the tree canopy and trees and as well as green space here in Arlington.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question. In July 2015, the county board voted to lease 1/3 of Roslyn-Hattis Park to a developer to build a 24-story office tower. In January 2015, they considered using a portion of Thomas Jefferson Park to construct an elementary school, and in recent months have discussed adding school and/or housing to a rebuilt facility in Lumber Run Park. Do you support the concept that parkland could be sacrificed in order to fulfill other county needs? If not, what specific solutions would you bring to the table to avoid such trade-offs?
Essentially, I don't want to see anything in parkland but parkland. I don't want to see affordable housing in parkland. I don't want to see parkland. You know, we've lost parkland in this county, and we need to acquire more parks and green space, and we need to go out and buy land and fulfill the obligation we have to our citizens in this county. You know, all these things are priorities in the county, because I learned through Public Land for Public Good when I was president of the Arlington County Civic Federation, that they pitted parks and schools and affordable housing against each other, and that's not right. So we need to make sure that we keep our priorities in balance and we do the right things for the entire community. Because not only does the community benefit by having good parks, good schools, and affordable housing, it's also the business community that really it drives the ability for us to bring more business into the county. Because if you're a business owner and you want to come to Arlington County and you have employees, you want those folks to be able to take advantage of our parkland and our bike paths and you know, our great schools. And you know, we need to do something about affordable housing, and we need to take a look at affordable housing. But affordable housing shouldn't be the #1 priority in the county, since we haven't done a very good job of it since 2003 in terms of putting more affordable housing units into the county. And now we were going to, through Public Land for Public Good, take the affordable housing and put it into parkland. And also because of the schools issues and the overcrowding, we were going to take those schools and put them in parkland. I don't agree with that. So that's where I am on this answer. So thank you.
So I don't believe in choosing priorities over the other to the exclusion of dealing with the many challenges that we face. I'm a multitasker, and I believe that through the process of multitasking, you actually usually come up with great solutions. When it comes to parks and open space, let me be clear. I don't want to see anything that is used as a park or was purchased to be used as a park, used for anything other than a park. That's simple. But we also have to recognize that we can't be so rigid that we close ourselves off to opportunities to actually expand our inventory. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, that is a true need in our community. We have a huge unmet demand, combined with the fact that parks and open spaces produces real, tangible economic value. We shouldn't be in a position where we're just simply looking to maintain the status quo. We want to expand opportunities for many reasons. When we think about children who want to play sports, opening up opportunities for girls as well as boys to play sports. When we think about our aging population that wants to recreate just as much as younger people, we should be in the business of thinking about more. That's going to come through strategic acquisition. It's going to mean, of course, not compromising what we already have. It's also going to mean being creative about acquiring things that exist currently as land or maybe conceptually can be built up in the air. These are the kinds of approaches that we absolutely need moving forward. Now, as we talk about the other priorities that exist in Arlington, my point of view is to find those avenues, those rare occurrences where you can get win-wins. We've done it rarely in this county, but that's what we should try to do. But not limit ourselves into such rigid thinking that it's parks, affordable housing, schools, whatever else you said, Mike. We can find ways to make sure we address all of our priorities in a concerted way. Nowhere is this more evident than with schools. And I'll get to that maybe for another question.
I do support maintaining our parkland as parkland. As others have said, our parks provide tremendous benefits. As recent research from the Parks Commission, I think, has proven to us, there are monetary benefits as well as the intangibles that we get. One of the things that I especially value about our parks, as somebody who cares a lot about diversity and more representation, is that they are some of our community meeting spaces that most foster that sort of interaction with folks who are different than you and may not live in your neighborhood. I do, however, agree with the Arlington Parks Coalition that we need to be flexible as we think about uses of space and creative uses of space. The other point I'd make, too, is that it's important to take the long view. We have in Arlington community centers that used to be schools, parks that used to be housing. And it's important to think about how our needs evolve as a community. And we need members on the county board that are not looking to pit these interests against each other, but to think about how they can support one another. You asked Katie for concrete strategies about what we do to protect the parkland. One of the big things I'd like to emphasize is that when this county and schools build together, that we have joint use agreements that are part of the lived reality of citizens. We have a lot of joint use agreements on paper, but citizens will often say that they find it difficult to use school green space as a neighbor if they're not participating, if they don't have a kid currently in that school. suggest to the county new opportunities for acquisition of parkland when they see it. Our real estate market moves fast. I heard a great story the other day about a citizen seeing a site on Redfin that was up for sale that then became Butler Holmes Park. And I think creating perhaps a hotline or just greater opportunities for citizens to flag to the county when they see opportunities for acquisition, so that we are acquiring new neighborhood parks and not just arguing over a fixed plot.
Yes, well, not only did I oppose the construction of a new office development at the site of Roslyn Highlands Park, I opposed the demolition of the Wilson School that will also make way for the new office development. This school, the Wilson School, is not only associated with the name of our former very famous president, Woodrow Wilson, but it was also designed by an eminent Virginia architect. His name is Mr. Charles Morris Robinson. This school is the oldest extant school in the county, and I believe it's the second oldest extant historic building. This school will be subject to demolition probably shortly after the election, and I'm traumatized thinking about it, let alone how I'm going to feel when it actually happens. So yes, I absolutely oppose the exchange of parkland for new office development at Roslyn Highland Park. With respect to TJ School, I follow a principle that I believe was enunciated by Mr. Presswood a year or so ago in a debate over construction of the school on that site. And his basic principle, if I understand it correctly, is that we ought to minimize the footprint for any new school capacity project. So that if you need to add classrooms, look to extensions and renovations first. And of course, build up rather than out. And never build on existing parkland. Now, with respect to Lover Run, obviously Lover Run should remain a park and recreation center. And if anything, we should be adding to the surrounding park, not subtracting from it. With respect to new park acquisition or new property acquisition by the county, as you know, the county is moving in the right direction right now. It's acquiring property near Washington Lee High School. It's acquiring property from Virginia Hospital Center. And I think that we should adopt a principle. Certainly, if I were elected, this is what I would do. I would say that any new properties acquired should be split half and half between parkland and other uses such as schools and housing. If that particular formula is too rigid, then I would ask the county to develop some kind of other formula that would apportion new property acquisition between parks and other uses.
Thank
You, Audrey.
So we're going to continue this line of questioning. So I'd like to encourage all of you to keep it specific because we're going to dive into very related issues. So I think folks will want to hear some of those nuances. So this next question has a bit of background, so bear with me while I read out the background. So contributions for land acquisition in the capital improvement plan funding cycles from 1996 to 2008 averaged $8 million per cycle. Since 2009, when there was no money designated for land acquisition, average contributions from all sources fell to an average of $2.6 million per cycle. The pre-2008 funding levels allowed the county to acquire 76 acres of parkland over the past 20 years. However, in the past 8 years, excluding land at Long Ridge Park in Crystal City, the county acquired just 4.1 acres for the rest of Arlington County, and only 2.5 of those were actually acquired by purchase. The rest were by easements, donations, site plans, or form-based code. And note that these figures do not include parkland lost for school expansions or processes such as the Western Roslyn Area Planning Study. If elected, and we talked about park acquisition in this last question, but will you commit to restoring funding for land acquisition to the pre-2008 funding levels? And would you ensure that land acquired for parks is used only for park and recreation? So we'll start this with Christian Dorsey.
Thank you. So I think the 10-year average that Katie referenced, where we spent about $4 million a year, $8 million per cycle, is about right when you think about escalating costs of real estate and the that's pretty reasonable, and I'm perfectly comfortable saying that that's the target that I'd like to be at. I'm an economist, so bear with me. Until I give you an exact figure, I want to look at every detail that I can, but the 8 million seems about right. We must also recognize that we're going to acquire parks through other means as well. When we redevelop the area, if we get the Quincy site, if we follow through with that contract, rest assured, some of that's going to be devoted to parkland. That's not going to be spent, that's not going to be paid for with park money. So we're going to have to use a variety of strategies in order to achieve this goal. The overriding question, though, will I want to use money that voters apportion through bonds for parks, or believe they're approving through a CIP for parks and use that for other purposes? No, that's dishonest. I'm not a dishonest guy. That's not the way I want to do business. If people give the authority to do something thinking that it's going to produce a certain result, it's our duty to deliver that result to them, or go back to them and say, there's another plan, do you approve it? But the ability to unilaterally decide that we're going to actually use what was the intent of the voters for other purposes is not the way I want to do business. And it's part of the reason why people have lost a little bit of faith in county government. And the least we can do to restore that faith is to actually do with the public's resources what we said we're going to do and what they authorized us to do. And that's a pledge. That's a pledge I'm willing to make.
Thanks, Katie. So I do think that the pre-2008 figures are fair ones. I think the most important thing is not so much, although the amount of money is important, but it's also important to think about what we do with it. And so that's what I'd like to take my minute to just focus on here. So as Christian noted, I also don't support the reprogramming of parks bonds for uses like the Artisphere. And I'd also like us to be using our acquisition to focus more on acquisition of small neighborhood parks. I think the Long Bridge Park is an incredible asset for our community, but I know that many of us feel like that's come at the expense of the neighborhood parks that we all value so much, just down the block from us, for example. And so I would like us to be looking at, as I mentioned earlier, more opportunities to acquire small parkland, or small properties that can be turned into neighborhood parkland, and using our funds for that. The last thing I would note too is, thinking also about the whole picture. I don't think that we ought to discount land that we sort of quote unquote acquire, or land that becomes parks through the development process. One of the other things I'd like us to focus on, I think we've maybe erred a little too much on focusing on community benefits in the forms of plazas or hardscaping, which are important. But what I'm hearing from many community members is we want to be thinking now about community benefits in terms of open green space. That does seem to be the greatest need in Arlington right now, and I'd like that to be our new focus in how, in the other ways we add to our parks picture as well as acquisition.
Well, I certainly endorse what the other candidates have said about the need to acquire more parkland and the unfortunate lack of park acquisition in the last few years. As an incentive to, I think as an incentive to provide more parkland, what we need to do is establish a principle that parks should be part of the community benefit that is negotiated with every new site plan development project. And yes, this open space should not be simply plazas, it should be greenscape. In addition to that, I would suggest that the county aggressively pursue the purchase of additional parkland. In addition to that, I would say that the county must, in general, increase the amount of acreage per 1,000 persons that is devoted to park, such that any new site plan development project that would significantly increase the density of the population in a given neighborhood be accompanied by purchase of parkland or otherwise new acquisition of parkland. So parkland should be considered as part of every new site plan development project. I know that is not currently the case because just the other night, the Planning Commission heard of the developer of a new site plan or a new development at Glebe Road called Flats. That's Glebe Road and Carlin Springs Road. And I understand from talking to some of the citizens who reviewed that site plan that there's no provision for additional parkland, even though it will produce, I think, approximately or close to 200 units of housing.
Plus they cut down all the trees that were there.
So it's clear that what the county talking about. I advocate fiscal impact analysis for every new site plan development project, including impacts on parks, transit, and schools.
Well, to be specific tonight, I'm for $8 million to be spent for capital money moving forward. I think it's an important thing that we need to do in this county in order to enhance our park system. I also agree that in the language for the bonding, it should be explicit. I don't know how many of you folks go into the voting booth and read the bonding language, but you can't make heads or tails out of the bonding language. And that's why some of the money gets moved around inside the park system. I think it needs to be very explicitly stated what the funds are going to go to. And by having that be the case, we know that our dollars are being spent in a wise way in this county and are being put forth in the places that we really need to have them put forth. I agree that on the Quincy site that we should be looking at putting parklands on that site too, but I also think that we should get the air rights of I-66 and think about doing special things on above I-66, like putting parkland in, maybe schools, maybe development for office space and so forth. I think there are a lot of things that we could do with the air rights and putting a deck over I-66. You're starting to see that happen today in the district. They're building a building downtown over 395 portion of it. So I think there's a great opportunity there, just given the fact that we're running out of land in this county.
Thank you. So I'm going to change the tune just slightly. We're still on parks. What is your position on the construction of a pool fitness center complex in South Arlington? Do you think that Arlington should increase its recreation, physical activity, and sports spaces for its residents? If yes, how would you do so? Again, try to be specific, and we'll focus on sports facilities for this question rather than parks broadly.
Sure, I appreciate your asking it. This is a challenging question for our community, right? What we're going to do about the Longbridge Aquatic Center, this runs not only the questions about parkland and acquisition, but about fiscal stewardship here in Arlington. And so I, like many, am watching closely to see what sort of plans the Aquatic Center Working Group comes back with. Certainly it is going to be important for us if we do pursue any of that project that we're doing so in a way that certainly has us living within our means and potentially explores new partnership with surrounding jurisdictions. So I am mindful of the need for additional spaces, recreational spaces that can be programmed for sports here in the community. That is one of the needs that comes with having more kiddos in our school system. It's one of the needs that comes with having a lot of young adults in our community who do have the demand for recreational spaces. To me, this is a balance, right, between these needs for programmable spaces and the clear appetite that I'm hearing throughout the county for more green, open, flexible spaces. It's part of why I think it's so important to expand the pie. And I also think it's important that we start looking again at the use cases for any given space. We have a lot of things that we design or intend to work a certain way. Katie, I think you mentioned, easements to different parks or technically open spaces that, for whatever reason, feel inaccessible to community members. And so really getting better about studying sites and proposals to ensure that they are meeting the different needs of different community members at different times of day. I think that we can be more creative about how we program spaces and which spaces we leave unprogrammed so that people have the opportunity, frankly, to sit under a tree or put out a picnic blanket. That's really what I'm hearing the greatest appetite for in the community right now, and something I'd be particularly focused on as a board member.
Yes, well, regarding the aquatic center, I have concerns about it not just in terms of the dollar cost, which the last time I looked, it would have been in excess of, I believe, $50 million. Actually, more than that. I think it was $120 million to construct the facility, the grandiose facility that county board had in mind. I am not opposed to a community aquatic facility, but not the Olympic-size facility that these folks were talking about. But I have another concern about the Longbridge site. I was told by an engineer I encountered on the campaign trail a couple years ago that site is still contaminated, that there are toxic substances still in the ground there due to prior industrial activity. And basically what the county did, and I'm not quarreling with what they did, they basically, using state-of-the-art techniques, covered it over so that it is now safe to play soccer there. But I question very seriously whether it's safe to dig a swimming pool there, because you're basically going to have to go underground and dig up all those chemicals. Also, there's a question of the water table. I understand that that's basically a very swampy area that is not particularly stable. And so I question the efficacy of actually constructing any major facility there. I think a better alternative, if we're looking for swimming facilities, is to partner with neighboring jurisdictions. I believe Alexandria and Arlington are talking about that right now. And they are looking at the Long Bridge site, but I'm thinking that perhaps they ought to look at other sites in Alexandria, Falls Church, and Fairfax County.
Well, I don't agree that we should build a water park in South Arlington. It just doesn't make sense. When I sat on Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission, there was never a study done in the area to see who would actually use the facility once we built it. But on the same hand, walking through the county and talking to folks, I realized too that we probably may want to think about putting a pool in South Arlington, just a simple pool so people can use it for exercise, either at Long Branch or possibly in Knock, where there was once a pool in Knock at some point in time. You know, I go back and take a look at the playing fields and so forth through my time as I spent as a coach, coaching baseball and coaching lacrosse and things of that nature. I've seen the facilities that we put in this county and also realized through Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission that we've underfunded those facilities, and those fields that were brand new and were so beautiful have become not nearly as good as what they used to be. I think we need to fund the maintenance of our parkland and also our sports activities so our kids have good places to play, and just do the basic upkeep, and then think about doing expansion of those fields and so forth. You know, I got involved in the flag football league here in Arlington County with my kids. It started with 75 kids, and the gentleman who runs the league, Bart, I think he's up to about 1,500 kids, and they're using fields all across the county in an expansion of this great sport. So we need to make sure that we have those fields so these kids can play on, and that those fields are properly maintained.
So when it comes to Long Bridge, I can assure both of the independent candidates that there is demand for more pool space in Arlington, not just for people who want to refine their stroke, but for people who have disabilities, for seniors, to have therapeutic pool space. We have a lack of public pool space in Arlington. So Long Bridge development that does so responsibly, affordably, is scaled to the need that we have in Arlington, I believe is the appropriate way to think about that. Do agree that the grandiose plans to attract Olympic level attention was a misguided way for our community to proceed, but what we do need to do is to proceed with the actual needs that we have. Speaking of which, athletically, as I mentioned, alluded to before, the world has changed from when many of the built playing field environments were created in Arlington. We have many more people who have a desire for organized sports. We need to meet that through enhancing the number of fields that we offer, and also just programming and maintaining the ones that we have, such as Jenny Dean Park, which we've allowed to fall into disrepair, making sure that we maximize what we have available. But under no circumstance should that desire for organized sports level activity completely usurp the need for people to have other forms of recreation space, whether it be completely passive or programmed in some other way. We have to have it all, and we have to be flexible with what we provide. I think if there's one criticism I have about Arlington is that we sometimes get too into the programming, and we don't realize that kids can play soccer on a big patch of rectangle. It doesn't have to be specifically sized for those purposes. It doesn't have to be organized from an organized team perspective. And then the other point that I would finally make is when we think about all of these competing needs and all of these opportunities that people would want to avail themselves of, we have to make sure that,
Thank you for respecting the clock.
putting that all in closing remarks.
The county board adopted the Natural Resources Management Plan in 2011, noting that only 4.4% of Arlington's 26 square miles remain in natural lands, and approximately half of that is within the George Washington Memorial Parkway. The plan identified the critical ecosystem services that our remaining natural areas and mature tree cover provide. The natural resources management plan calls for a zero loss of county-controlled natural lands. If elected, will you reaffirm the county policy of zero loss of remaining natural lands? And would you support annual funding to ensure ongoing maintenance to remove and reduce invasive species, provide restoration plantings, and ensure the protection of the natural habitat of these areas? I think we're back to starting at Audrey.
Okay. Well, of course I endorse that, and as a matter of fact, I raised the zero loss of county-owned natural lands as a reason not to go forward with the Roslyn Highland Park project that would in fact reduce, I believe, the size of the park by 30%. But I was aware, even at that hearing, or those hearings where this issue was raised, that what county might try to do is something called a sleight of hand, whereby they would take away 30% from Roslyn Highlands Park and try to bring it in some other way by purchasing a parcel somewhere else in the county that might not actually be suitable for a park. So I think we actually need to tighten up that policy to say something like the no loss of existing county parkland. In other words, I don't think that policy is tight enough. And I want to emphasize the fact that not only am I a conservationist, I'm actually an environmentalist. Not only am I a conservationist, but I'm also a preservationist. So while I'm at it, I'm going to plug again for the preservation of Wilson School. Thank you.
Yes, I would support that, and I agree with Audrey. I think that we need to be very explicit about existing parklands so that we are very explicit about what we are going to keep. Yeah, as I spoke about before, we do have a tree canopy issue here in the county, and it's important that we have more trees in the county. Because, you know, the American Lung Association has given us an act for air quality in this county because we're ringed in by cars through highways and so forth. And I can tell you for sure, I live off 66 is where my neighborhood is. And every 6 months I have to go outside and hose down my house because it's black with soot. So trees would help clear the air in the county. Also, invasive species are important to make sure that we take care of and we get them out of the ground and so forth. They cleaned out our park in our neighborhood. We spent the day with the community going down there with the county and so forth, cleaning out the invasive species because you don't want to choke back good plants and trees and so forth from their ability to grow.
So we're about to undergo, the process to update the Parks and Open Spaces Master Plan. And for me, what's important is that we have a robust process that brings in lots of input to figure out what we actually put pen to paper. I, as a county board member, want to oversee and make sure that that is a legitimate, a fair, inclusive, and responsive process. And from there, I'm committed to following through with whatever those recommendations are. Now, I can't imagine that on any level we're going to retreat from this idea of not having any net loss of our natural resources inventory. So, yes, I fully support that. What I'm also more interested in is the process for this update, which is going to really figure out how we move forward over the next 5 years or so. That's a critically important thing. When it comes to invasives, which you also asked about, this is a problem when you don't properly recognize what it is you're trying to solve. We typically funded our invasive species control through closeout funds, through year-end funds, one-time money. Well, as anyone who's dealt with invasives know, anyone who's dealt with pests of any kind knows, that one-off strategy doesn't work. So you're spending good money after bad by not having a sustained strategy to deal with your invasives. So what I would like to see is that actually move and be elevated to a budget level. We're really not talking about a whole lot of money here, but if we want to actually fix the problem as opposed to just dealing with it at the same level periodically when we think that there's money available, I think the way to do it is to actually bake it in to our annual budget and make sure that we control it and actually do a good job of eliminating, as we have with certain species that we've targeted and had a sustained effort to try to rid our open spaces of.
So like others, I do affirm the goal of protecting our natural resource conservation areas, and would just echo the comments about my enthusiasm for the upcoming Open Spaces Master Plan reboot, which is a little overdue. What I am excited about in this planning process, I think, and this is certainly one thing to get excited about, but the need, for example, that I've heard from APC about thinking about parking as part of the infrastructure supporting a park. And so I hope that'll be an important emphasis as we do go about this updating of the open spaces master plan. With respect to invasive species management, as others have said, I do support the idea of funding that in a sustained, ongoing way, not just with one-time closeout funds, both because it's the important thing to do for our environment and because I think it's a nice model for public-private partnership in the county, the way that county funds can go to support our tree stewards and our master naturalists. One of the things I think about a lot, we talk about our student population boom, we also have a population boom coming on retirees. This is a group of folks here in Arlington that have a lot to give back. And what's exciting to me about the Master Naturalist Program, about the Tree Stewards Program, is that it's an opportunity to harness some of the talents and energies of this growing retiree class in a way that's helpful and benefits all of us. So that is a program I would be looking to fund and in fact learn from as we think about other programming around town.
Thank you. This next question will be the last one from our co-sponsoring group, so go ahead and take notes about what you want to ask follow-up questions on. This last question has to do with smart growth. According to the Trust for Public Land, a key measure of livability of a community is the ability to walk to a park within 1/2 of a mile. Arlington lags far behind other urban centers in citizen access to parks and open space and has been criticized by smart growth advocates for its failure to plan adequately for parks and open space, especially on metro corridors. If elected, what would you do to create a more livable, walkable community where all residents have ready access to parks and open space, including those along transit corridors? And I'll just emphasize again to be specific, smart growth, transit corridors, and walkability to parks. I think we're on mic.
Well, the Roslyn-Boston corridor has been built, and there isn't much that we can do in the Roslyn-Boston corridor except maybe in the future, but that land is very expensive. But we have two great opportunities still left. We have Columbia Pike and we have the highway. Both are being looked at today in terms of being built out. I think we can learn from our mistakes about not having enough green space and walkability to parks when we go and build out those corridors. It's important that we have this green space in the county because it will enhance business and enhance the ability for citizens to get out and have recreational places to go to. So I'm all for trying to put more green space into the county, into these new corridors, and having the ability to walk to these things. I can tell you that some of the communities in the neighborhoods that are close to the Boston-Roslyn corridor, they do have some parks in there, in those neighborhoods. Perhaps we can enhance those parks and make those parks better and probably buy some more parkland that are in those communities. But along the corridor, you're right, the smart growth was not really very smart. So I think that we have a good opportunity in this election because I see this as a watershed year and also a year where we have to make a decision about the next 25 years of what Arlington County is going to look like. Are we going to become an urbanized centric place where we're going to have office buildings and housing and apartments and so forth and not as much in terms of neighborhoods? Or are we going to have a balance though? And that's what I want to see, a balance, because I don't want to see us lose our neighborhoods and our parks and so forth. I don't want us to become a city environment. So I want to try to keep that split that we have today and build in the right way so that we keep our neighborhoods, but we also do smarter growth in terms of how we build out the next portion of Arlington County.
So one of the things I'm willing to admit is that in Arlington, we don't have all the answers, and we need to, with this particular area, learn from other communities who have dealt with this challenge and actually made some significant progress. One that I've looked at a lot is Seattle, which had similar deficits in looking at the number of residents who were within a half-mile access of a park. They went through a concerted process through their version of master planning, and said, look, we're going to use strategic acquisitions, we're going to use public-private partnerships, and we're going to improve this. So they got, most of their residents within that half-mile stand, and then they said, you know what? Let's change that. Let's make it within a third of a mile. So that's the kind of approach that I think we need to take, is first of all learning from other people who've already done this a little bit better than we have. When it comes to smart growth, I will admit that Arlington probably looked at the smart growth principles and applied them on steroids and didn't necessarily reflect all of the things that a community needs. Those lessons, I think we tried to correct as we've gone along. You look at Rocky Run Park on the Roslyn-Boston corridor, where we developed that into a space that serves a variety of uses and can be a model for what we do elsewhere. We've done it with Woodstock. We've done it with Chestnut Hills in North Arlington. These are the types of things that we need to see moving forward. And when it comes to what we do in Columbia Pike, planning has already reflected a lot of the lessons learned from the way the RV corridor developed so that we can provision the opportunity for a more walkable, livable community in terms of access to parks.
So perhaps unlike Mike, I'm not ready to give up on parkland in the Roslyn to Boston corridor. I'm a former resident of the RV corridor, and I know that folks who are there need park space solutions too. This idea that our land uses are fixed, that we don't have a chance to add parks when we think about redeveloping sites is actually just wrong. And I'll give you a great example of another model, as Christian mentioned, studied from other communities. We know, for example, that in the Roslyn to Boston corridor, in our transit corridors tightly around Metro, there isn't the same need for parking. I'm talking just about the Roslyn to Boston corridor. I know parking throughout the county is a broader issue. But when you look, for example, at DC, which built a massive new parking garage at $40 million of cost to taxpayers there, that's never more than 50% full because it's right next to the Columbia Heights Metro, I think we're seeing that it is possible for us to think about land differently in our corridors. And so I'd like us to look at a model that Palo Alto has adopted and see if it could fit here. They've relaxed parking minimums surrounding transit as long as the developers are willing to use the land saved to convert into natural landscape reserves. I think there are opportunities as we think about the redevelopment of sites around the RV corridor in particular to ensure that we're getting parkland there. Because, Katie, as you've noted, and as you've noted in conversations we've had previously, it's so important to think about what our urban village dwellers need in terms of access to small neighborhood parks. This is not something that we get just outside of our transit areas. So we need to be thinking about Roslyn-Boston corridor. We need to be thinking about Pentagon City and Crystal City, as well as, of course, Columbia Pike, when we look for opportunities to create green space in redevelopment site plans.
Well, not only do we lack adequate park space now, we are losing what we've got. Now, I live at half a block from the one park that does exist along the R&B corridor, and that is Bon Air Park. This is a lovely park, but unfortunately, the gardens in it are no longer being maintained, or at least that it appears that the gardens are no longer being maintained by the master gardeners, who apparently were funded to do it in the past, because the mulch piles that are used to fertilize those gardens are now overgrown. So clearly, we're not even maintaining at our existing level of funding the parks that we do have. Now, if I understand Katie correctly, she's saying one of the solutions might be to trade parking for parkland. In other words, if we were to allow developers to construct less parking on their sites, we would actually free up more land for parkland around their sites. So the slogan might be, let's trade parking for parkland. If that's what Katie is talking about, it sounds right to me.
Depends on a very cooperative. So we're ready to take audience questions. You're welcome to try your hand at this mic. I'm guessing you won't want to. I think we'll start with a question from Nora from True Stories.
Thank you. I don't think I need the mic, but the community facilities draft plan is now online. And I sat through many of the long meetings as a representative for the Urban Forestry Commission. I'm sure I saw a lot of you there too. There was a lot of comment about open space being very necessary, about the importance of trees, of green open space, of permeable land. So whenever I went online and looked through the draft, if you do a search of it, the word tree doesn't show up anywhere. The word environment doesn't show up. The word permeable doesn't show up, or forest. And yet there are parts on it that they talk about the importance of open space, fields, cultural centers. But my question to you is, if you get on the board and that comes before you, would you ask to have it amended so so that it discusses the importance of the environment, tree canopy, et cetera, at the same rate that it talks about the importance of playing fields, libraries, et cetera.
And I'll just note that the response for the audience questions will be 1 minute, whereas the previous questions were 2, so keep it concise. I think we're starting, yeah.
So, yeah, I've seen that draft, and there are a lot of things, as with most drafts, that you'd like to see. I didn't specifically call that out, but some of the references which seem to prioritize certain facilities over the other, it's going to need a lot of work. So I think there is going to be a lot of work that happens with the document between now and the end of the year. It's going to be a pretty public process. I think it can be improved immeasurably. I think the whole process is very useful for Arlington. I'm glad we have it moving forward. But you're right, whenever you put things in paper, it begins to call out what is important and what is not. So we want to err on the side of being comprehensive. So I agree with that.
I agree as well. Thank you for the suggestion. Having just recently read it, I think that's an omission that would improve the planning. You know, the joint facility study is so interesting. In many ways, it's a process about a process. One of the things that I want to be sure that is crystal clear as a result of the work that that facilities group has done is a clear, understandable, easily accessible process for our siting decisions. Because as veterans of the RAPS process, as folks who've recently been through the issues of a fire station can tell you, we do not have a clear and common and consistent process. And so I do want us to drive towards a highly streamlined version of the document that just emphasizes the process. In addition, however, though, I think there are opportunities to stake out content, values, principles. I think that's a great addition. I'm looking forward to seeing that draft evolve, and I hope having an opportunity to help evolve it myself.
Well, I understand that the draft of this facilities report excludes environment, permeable forest, and that's because no doubt, the authors of this report, though well-intentioned, lack a very simple concept. It's called ecological wisdom. All right, our culture is predicated on something called an economic growth engine, and that economic growth engine does not include, except as an ancillary value, things like park and green space. If I were elected, I would replace as a guiding principle the notion of ecological wisdom, which says that unless an economic development is consistent with ecological values, it is likely to fail, or it is likely not to optimize the quality of life for everybody in that society. So if I get elected, I'm going to be talking about something called ecological wisdom. This is a value that I have acquired as a student of the environment, and I believe that if this principle were implemented, it would lead to a better society.
Well, the facility study came about because the Civic Federation couldn't come to a position in terms of parks, schools, and affordable housing and where they needed to be sited. It took 6 months for us to get a consensus position, which was basically led to this facility study, and the facility study isn't complete. It won't be complete until November. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done with the facility study, and a lot of work and a lot of tweaking that needs to be done with the facility study. So I don't think the process is finished. I think it's going to go on in time, but we want to make sure that we do the right things as a community and make sure that we take and look at the parks and we look at the schools and look at affordable housing. I'm not pitting those folks, as they said, against each other. I'm not. I sought a consensus position within the Arlington County Civic Federation to get a position where it's palatable, which led to the facility study so that we do the right thing for those 3 constituencies.
Okay, I'll attempt to work from here to there, so go ahead. Yeah.
I apologize, I had the wrong lot in line, but it's only a block away. The county board has another problem because they listen too much, I think, to one group as opposed to the neighbors, not on an equal basis. In our neighborhood, it happens to be the housing authority, APA, and we didn't disapprove, we didn't not want them to come in, that's fine, but the building building is on the sidewalk. They have left no green space, not even 5 feet to the door. They've torn down every single tree that was on that plot. They were beautiful shady trees. And that's our objection. And unfortunately, we live there. The staff on the county board also, I think, lives in statistics and not real life. So we feel that we are not being heard on a 50% level. And that's where our issue is. Please address the county board, staff, and Alpha.
Sure. Can you tell me what neighborhood you're from?
This is Carlin Springs Road and North Thomas Street,
Okay.
where a new public housing building is.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Let me try to go after the responsiveness question, my one issue. I do think this is a tremendous concern of many residents from all backgrounds who feel unheard by the current county board. I think some of that changes just with tone. Listening county board members who are physically in your neighborhoods aren't just reliant on the folks who can come to a site planning meeting from 7 to 10 p.m. on a weeknight, but spending time physically in the site that will be affected. As you've noted, I think that the importance of spending time walking a site, getting a sense of how it feels, talking to the neighbors by physically being there, is one of the most important commitments you can ask out of your county board members, and it's one I've been talking about throughout the campaign trail, as well as looking for other alternatives and opportunities for folks to give input on their process. It's a little thing, but I don't think we design surveys especially well. Sometimes it feels like a survey is being sent out to the community to get us the answer we already want to hear. And so I think part of it is greater responsiveness from county board members, and then thinking about how that works with the staff as well.
Christy, we're at Arlington.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned APA, because last night I had the misfortune of being invited to its annual fundraiser, and quite frankly, I was grossed out. I mean, there was lavish food, wine, and all kinds of stuff. It did not seem appropriate for a nonprofit. And to be honest with you, I didn't enjoy myself. It's not that I don't like to go to parties, but I didn't know anybody there. One of the board members approached me because she saw me at a campaign forum and was somewhat hostile to some comments that I made about APA's affordable housing vision. But other than that, I had no one to talk to. And so I would just simply say, yes, APA is an insulated group. It likes to congratulate itself for accomplishments that it hasn't really performed. I mentioned to the board member, well, yes, you have constructed X amount of new housing, but you've lost 10,000 more units in the process. And that just doesn't compute with a group of people who have insulated themselves from the larger public. And as far... Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I agree. One of the fundamental principles of why I'm running this year is because the county doesn't listen to us. They go through a process, the staff goes through a process, they build something that they think that we're going to like, and then at the very end of the process, they sometimes come to the community, or if the community finds out about it, and then you get your say about the project, whether it's affordable housing or fire stations or whatever it is that we're trying to do in this county. We need to become much more transparent in this county in regards to making sure that the community has input at the very beginning, and that the community gets what it wants out of the facility that's being built, and that the county does the right thing. So I'm all for more transparency, more input to staff to make sure that we take into the needs of the community, and that we build projects and affordable housing and fire stations in places where the community needs to have those facilities and things happen, because we have issues where we're trying to save fire stations in other areas of the county, and there's question marks about that. But in terms of, just doing the right thing and building and getting community input.
So I've been involved in Arlington for a lot of years, and I've never heard the community speak with one voice. Doesn't happen. All right. So in any situation, there are going to be people who are unhappy. We recognize that. But people can feel validated, respected, if they have a process where they're able to give input freely. Not just input, they have the basis to give their input, because we've shared relevant information and background so that they can make informed decisions. Once they've gotten that background, they've provided that input, it's then our responsibility as staff and the board to explain fully and without snark or annoyance or curtness why we're going to do what we're going to do. You elect people to exercise their judgment, but they deserve to tell you fully and completely how they're exercising that judgment. If we get to that point in Arlington, I think we will have succeeded. I think it's a bit too facile to just think we can make the community happy. But what we can do is make the community feel valued, and that's where we fail.
Okay, so I work for this, so, that.
Mark Campbell, I live in North Roslyn. We've just come through a process that was dishonest to determine what was going to happen to the last possible location for substantial recreation in my neighborhood. We doubt that in the map. And we're losing that. And I say it was dishonest because the decisions were made well before the public process happened. The outcome is horrible. This is a community that doesn't have places for kids to play, turning into a neighborhood that really doesn't have places for kids and families. Got pretty upset. Do you have any thoughts about how to undo that outcome?
Yes, Mark wants to know, how can we undo the new mixed-use development at the site of Roslyn Highlands Park and preserve the park in its original state? And also, how can we preserve Wilson School on that site? And what I would do is, if elected, I would get the ear of the Economic Development Director, and I would ask him to consult with Penzance and to explain to Penzance that the office market is really not very promising right now. And with the Republicans in control of Congress for the foreseeable future, it's not going to look bright for a long, long time. And please, could you convince Penzance that it's not in its economic self-interest to build that mixed-use site on the location of Roslyn Highlands Park?
Well, as you know, Mark, I stood with you guys at the county board hearing about this project, and I supported the neighborhood in terms of the project in general, and loss of the park space and the building itself and the fire station being put there through the land deal. The letter of intent wasn't transparent. That's one of the things that we need to get better about in this county. We need to have more transparency because that letter of intent was signed a few years ago, and it only came to light at the end of the process that we realized that there was a letter of intent already made to the builder. And unfortunately, the county board has ruled and moved forward with this project, and Penzance is going to move forward with the project. And I think they're still negotiating with the project with Penzance, trying to get larger fields up there. So there's still some time in the process, I think, to do the right things for the project. But at the end of the day, I think that we need to have more transparency in terms of the process and what the county does on major acquisitions such as this, so that we don't go down this road again and have to find out at the very end of a process that the deal was cut before anybody knew it.
Since we've gone through this forum rodeo a few times, I can suspect that we all generally agree that the process got in. The Penzance LOI, as well as the whole way in which that process was unveiled to the community, was one of our low points in Arlington that all of us are ashamed of and are eager to learn from how we never replicate those again. Question about moving forward, Mark. I don't think this process can be undone, but what we can make sure is that we hold forth the principles that we should have had from the very beginning. When you look at Roslyn Highlands Park, I disagree with Audrey. It need not simply be preserved, it needs to be enhanced, big time. It lives in a concrete island of a community where it should be much better in providing opportunities to all manner of people. And this process, if it is going to go forward, and if I have anything to say about it, that amenity must be viewed more integrally to that site and also to the surrounding community. It needs to have enhancements far above and beyond just simply the square footage that it exists right now.
Thank you for sharing your experience, for sharing the value of that park. I think, as I noted in my opening statement, and others have said, as we've talked about throughout, this is a process from which we surely have a lot to learn because it was not conducted been approved. I think that is going to be a process that I will be paying close attention to, certainly in the next couple of months, and I hope as a board member. I don't think we get a second chance at this. A lot of the damage has been done, but it will be an opportunity for the county to show, and for the developer to show that they can proceed with much greater sensitivity and understanding of the community needs to eventually get a Roslyn Highlands site and school and fire station and mixed-use building to serve the full community needs.
We've got time for 2, maybe 3. So, go here.
I live in Waverly Hills, which of all the neighborhoods in Arlington County has probably one of the least amount of park and open spaces. The only thing that protects us is that we haven't had a lot of infill, so we haven't lost what we've had personally. I've noticed though, more and more in recent years, that people keep saying, save my benefit, preserve my benefit, let's put the burden in someone else's neighborhood. Burdens being things like the school trailers, the affordable housing. I hate to call a senior center burden, but some people consider it that. I would like to know, and the result is this just caused horrible fighting. I just see much more tension in Arlington County than I've seen in past years. You better support mine, forget about them. What specifically would you do if you were on the board to ensure that the benefits and the burdens are fairly dispersed throughout the county? And how would you go about ensuring that the voices of everybody who might be benefited and impacted are heard, not just the voices of the people who speak the loudest or live the closest to the benefit?
Well, I think that the benefits should be geographically dispersed throughout the entire county. I live in northern Arlington, and we have affordable housing in my neighborhood near Cherrydale, Hunters Park. It's a senior citizens affordable housing. What I think that needs to be done, Sarah, is that we need to have more transparency, and we need to be more open towards the community, and we need to tell people that what exactly we're going to do, and then have meetings and so forth, and get that real citizens input in terms of making sure that people understand why this needs to be put in whatever community it is. That's what happened with Hunters Park, and it's a success story in my neighborhood because it allows people to age in place and also live affordably after the age of 62. And then we have affordable housing down the street from me on Lee Highway. So we're going to be building in the Lee Highway corridor and Columbia Pike, but we need to distribute things like affordable housing and other things in the county to make sure that geographically that it is well dispersed and it doesn't end up in one spot in the county.
Sarah, I really appreciate that. And I think one of the things we need to do is really redefine what these things are. They're not burdens from my point of view. You ask a retailer, what would it be like to bring units into your neighborhood where the people are spending no more than 30% of their income on housing? They probably say, I like that, sign me up. So affordable housing is not just something that provides a benefit for someone who's able to live less expensively. It provides a macroeconomic benefit in the community. I don't view senior housing as a burden to be absorbed. These are things that our community should embrace. And, when you think about it practically, Arlington is a community of 26 square miles. We don't have time for this not in my backyard stuff. We're really not bifurcated that way. We're one community. And when we think about where our needs are and the kinds of investments that they need to be made, we need to do so without bias towards privileging one area over another, and recognizing that these are a part of making our entire community work well. And then we need to connect the community through transportation so everybody can enjoy it.
Thank you for the question and for taking the big picture view. I think one of the strategies that we use to kind of get over this sense of not in my backyard is finding ways to address our needs that are compatible with the neighborhood. And so when I talk to folks, there is an appetite for affordability strategies throughout the county, all corners of the county. The pushback is around often density. And because density for a long time has been our only strategy to get to affordability, people who live in single-family neighborhoods don't want a mid-rise or high-rise building. They're perfectly happy with the diversity that comes from affordability. And so with the affordability issue, I've talked a lot about some of our strategies was so flawed, but I do think something we can learn there is that it'll be a new model for how we put an urban fire station in our community. It's a very different model from the fire stations we see on Lee Highway, for example. So looking for ways to address these needs with compatibility with the neighborhood, I think, is our best strategy moving forward.
Well, I want to thank the audience for this and all the other excellent questions that came tonight. I thought they were very high quality. How to combat NIMBYism is the question. Nowhere was NIMBYism more evident than in the debate at APS, the school board, on where to site a new high school last year. And basically, each neighborhood came in successive meetings arguing against their particular neighborhood. And that's basically how HB Woodlawn ended up where it's going to be. Now, how to combat that? In the near term, fiscal impact analysis. That means that's a specialized form of cost-benefit analysis whereby the impacts of development are weighed against their benefits, and an actual dollar value is placed on the benefit of the development, not to the developer, but to the taxpayers. So we need to implement fiscal impact analysis in the near term. In the long term, we need to change our form of government to a district form. If we had a district form of government, every neighborhood would have its protagonist on county board, and that's essentially what we need.
Okay, we've got one more question. I'm sorry, I think it's everyone. Go on.
Move back there. But I would encourage you to take a look at that and maybe work with the deputy manager, whatever that person's title is, and see how you might be able to enhance, bridging the gaps, more collaboration, maybe more outreach and education. So I wanted to find out if you all have any thoughts along those lines.
So you may not be from here, but you're very wise. Because it's one of my key criteria for the next county manager, that they not only have a sensibility towards what it means to properly engage with the public, but they actually bring a skill set. One of the things that I do in my life is to facilitate dialogues on tough, challenging issues like racism. And I've also been schooled, gone through a graduate program in public participation. It's a real discipline, not just something that you call a meeting and say you've had public participation. It's a real skill. So those sensibilities need to be in the next county manager and imbued in the staff. If we can't train them up to do it, we need to bring in people who actually have this background, because there's nothing more critical to the success of a community than the faith of citizens in the process and in their government. Quite frankly, all the issues that we've talked about, you'll decide which of our orientations you like the most, but none of us are going to succeed if we don't have Arlingtonians pulling together. I believe that just fundamentally. So you are quite wise. Thank you.
Welcome back. Glad to have you, Arlington. Thank you for demonstrating the value of a fresh perspective, which is something I've been talking about a lot on the campaign trail. As Christian noted, I think a lot of this does come down to the appointment of the next county manager, someone who is sort of a systems thinker and is thinking about the ways staff are incentivized or empowered, as well as held accountable for working with the community in more flexible ways. So I think that's going to be an incredibly important decision that the two people you elect on November 3rd will be tasked with. I also think, you were talking earlier about the joint facility study. I think that's coming in an opportune time. One of the things their recommendation is articulating is asking us to hew a little more closely to thinking about the spectrum of public engagement and being clear when the county is engaging with the community purely for the purposes of informing, all the way to when the county is engaging with the community with the intent of deferring to the decision that the community makes. I think one of the things that's been frustrating about our public processes is that we sometimes say we want to engage when we really want to inform, or we say we want a study group when we really just want input. So getting a little more clear is a nice opportunity I think that we have ahead of us.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with the staff or the structure of county government. I think the problem is that the staff are owned by the developers. Now, I hate to be critical of developers. They have brought us and will continue to bring us many benefits. The problem is that because they control staff, there is no room for input from the community. I mean, that's basically what's going on here. The developers have the ear around to implement a 72-hour transparency rule whereby all documents pertaining to a particular commission or county board meeting are made available to the public. And the importance of this was just, thank you.
Yes, you're correct, and I have a story to tell here about that. Our community had a condominium come in on Lee Highway that was going to butt up against our community. Now this time the developer came to me first and laid out his plans in my living room and showed me what he was going to do with the building. And then he came to a community meeting and it was near a bus stop and he was going to try to narrow the road down to make it not people go through the neighborhood leaving the building, maybe overpark the building so that we didn't have cars in their streets from the building, and also put the entrance and exit on Lee Highway, not on the street that was in the neighborhood. So we felt great going through the developer who was going to put this building in. Then staff came in and came to our meeting and told us that we weren't going to get any of that, and we got none of it at all. So we went back to staff and talked to staff, and they didn't budge. Then we went to the county board, and the county board members, specifically, I lobbied each one of them, and all of them said this was a staff recommendation, and because it's a staff recommendation, that's the way we're going to do it. Now, that's not good, folks. We need to listen to the people that are actually in the community and hear their thoughts about the project, especially when you have somebody that wants to do the right thing.
Thank you. Thanks for all of your questions. I think they were really helpful to this discussion. We're going to have closing remarks, 2 minutes apiece, and we'll go in the reverse order that we started opening remarks. So Katie will be first, and then Audrey Clement, Chris Dorsey, and Mike Beck.
Well, thank you again for your questions this evening. Thank you again to our hosts for facilitating this opportunity for us to hear from so many of you, and I hope share some of our own thoughts. I'd like to leave you with a word or two about my background and my vision for Arlington. I'm running for board because I believe that all of Arlington benefits when all of Arlington is represented. And I think that's true because our interests are interconnected, as tonight's discussion has well illustrated. Good solutions to school crowding aren't just a priority for parents, they help us liberate green space from the trailers currently occupying it. And as the Energy Masters partnership of ACE and the Cooperative Extension demonstrates, green values aren't just for environmentalists, they also help us address our affordability picture. So, greater representation and new perspectives, these are good things for our community. My own perspective is informed by my policy background and my experience working on education issues with communities all over the U.S., partnering on strategic planning, resource allocation, and community engagement. I have a record of service here in Arlington as a commissioner in our public processes and as a volunteer and an appointee for our public schools. I have the experience to know how things get done, or don't, in Arlington County, paired with a genuine openness to new ideas and an eagerness to learn from Arlington's uniquely well-informed citizens. I appreciate your being here tonight. I appreciate your questions and your thoughts, and I hope that we'll continue our conversation. I'm asking for one of your 2 votes on Tuesday, November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you once again for your excellent questions and insights as well. Arlington is one of the wealthiest counties in the United States, but our streets are crumbling and our quality of life is threatened by the county's misdirected planning priorities. The office vacancy rate is at an all-time high as federal agencies move to cheaper digs elsewhere in Northern Virginia. County board has thrown money at the problem, but has proposed no business tax relief. Instead, it has doubled down on new mixed-use development as the solution to the exodus of government tenants. With more than 3,000 housing units already planned for Crystal City, developer Bernardo is now asking the county to upzone the River House neighborhood for high-rise development. In short, the county's solution to the erosion of the commercial tax base is densification with little thought given to the impact on our schools, parks, and streets. If elected, I pledge to require a fiscal impact analysis for every new site plan development project to assure that it actually benefits the county. I also pledge to stretch for tax dollars by scuttling wasteful capital projects and redirecting funds for basic needs like streets, schools, libraries, parks, and public safety. Finally, I plan to seek tax relief for the commercial sector. You can find out more by visiting my Facebook page at Audrey Clement for a Greener Arlington or my blog at audreyclement.com, and vote for me, Audrey Clement, on November 3rd. Thank you.
think we'll all agree is how excellent this forum was in terms of, first of all, the reception from all of you and the quality and depth and diversity of the questions. I really appreciated it. One of the things that I wanted to talk about earlier that I promised that I would get to in closing was talking about what's possible when we think about problems or think about priorities, not apart, but together. When you think about our school capacity problem, and you think about a solution that includes shrinking the footprint of a school, you think about taking those relocatable classrooms that never relocate, ridding them from school space, opening up that green space that they currently occupy, using design to actually have it interact with the community. Think about how we expand our open space, our parks, while improving our capacity issues. That's only possible if we actually think creatively and that we multitask and don't pit one priority against the other, but look at how we solve these things for the betterment of all of Arlington in a responsible way. That's the kind of approach I want to bring to the board. And when we think about what it's going to take, part of these candidate forums is a little bit dishonest because we talk a lot about what we're going to do. And quite frankly, we can't do it alone. We're going to actually have to serve on a board before other people. And I'm proud that all 5 board members who are currently serving have endorsed my candidacy and identified me as someone who they think can work constructively toward the betterment of Arlington. And I think when it comes to our future does look bright, but it's not going to happen by accident. It's going to require board members who are committed to rolling up their sleeves and not being the ones who get it all done, but who can work constructively with their colleagues and, most importantly, to restore faith with our community, with everyone who is a stakeholder in it, to move us forward. That's what my candidacy offers. My name is Christian Dorsey. You can find out more about me at christiandorsey.org, and I've got some literature for you to grab at the table. Thank you again for the wonderful event tonight.
Well, we all know Arlington is a great place to live. We have a creative, highly educated workforce in the county. We have Metro Rail and the corridors that are very important to our industry and commerce and commuters. We have award-winning schools that we need to keep award-winning. We have parks and bike trails that enhance our community. We have community engagement such as we have here tonight. That's very, very important. And most importantly, we live in a very safe community. But we can do better as a community. You know, we talked a lot tonight about parks, and I'm a strong park advocate. You know, I want to make sure that we enhance our parks, do the right things by our parks, and make sure that we don't build affordable housing and schools in our parks because we've lost parkland, as was mentioned here earlier tonight. You know, I want to see a more robust business inserted into the county so that we can fill that occupancy rate. I want to make sure that we build the schools that we need up and not out so that we don't take the green space away. We need to replace our aging infrastructure in the county. We need to pave our roads and make sure that we're doing the core things in this county by putting money back into the neighborhoods, the taxpayer money that we so desperately need to put curb and gutter and things of that nature into our neighborhoods. We need to reinvent and relook at the Arlington way so the folks are brought in at the front end of the project, not the back end of a project. We need to be, you know, it's a watershed year, and we need to take a close look at this election. You're going to vote for 40% of what the board is today, right? And we're going to get a new county manager this year, too. So whatever we do in this election is going to shape Arlington County for the next 25 years. I have the good fortune of being endorsed by John Bicep this year. We share the same values, the same outreach, and same transparency. So I ask for your vote on November 3rd. And I appreciate you taking the time tonight, coming out and listening to us, and have a good evening.
Well, I'll just reiterate my thanks to the candidates and to you all. And again, that date is Tuesday, November 3rd. You can vote for 2 candidates. Just note that we have some information about the croissant organizations in the back. You're welcome to come and chat with us. None of us will endorse candidates, but I will mention that there is another environmental forum on Smart Growth on October 23rd that ACE and the Sierra Club will be hosting, so you're encouraged to join them. That's